It was one of those evenings when everything inside the mansion sparkled a little too much. The lights were bright, the laughter was loud, and the air was thick with perfume and pride. The wealthy man who owned the house stood near the grand piano in the center of the room, holding a glass of wine and talking about success as if he had invented it himself. His friends, dressed in expensive suits and glittering jewelry, nodded and smiled at every word. They were used to his show-off nature. He liked to remind everyone that he had the best of everything: the biggest house, the rarest wines, and the most expensive piano. The grand piano was his favorite thing in the room. It was shiny and white, placed right under a chandelier that looked like a waterfall of crystal. He often said it was not just an instrument but a piece of art. He would brag about how it was imported from another country, and that only a real artist could do justice to it. The truth was, he himself couldn't play even a single tune properly, but that never stopped him from pretending he could. That evening, the mansion was crowded. Everyone laughed too loudly and clapped too quickly at every joke the man made. Among the crowd, moving quietly with a tray in her hands, was a simple woman. She worked part-time as a helper for such events. She wasn't from a rich background. In fact, her life was far from easy. She took small jobs like this one to pay for her mother's medicines and rent. Her clothes were plain and her hair was neatly tied back. She didn't speak much, but there was something calm and graceful about her. As she walked past the guests, a few of them barely noticed her. To them, she was invisible, just another worker moving around to make sure their glasses stayed full. But one of the women at the party recognized her. She leaned toward the wealthy man and said with a small smile, "You know, I think that young woman over there plays the piano. I saw her once at a small community event in town." The wealthy man raised his eyebrows. "Her play the piano?" he asked, his tone full of disbelief. A few people turned to look. The woman nodded politely, trying to explain. Yes, she played beautifully. It was a small event for the children's school. Everyone there was touched by her music. The man laughed, a sharp, mocking laugh. "Oh, really? A helper who plays the piano better than professionals? That's something I must see." A few of his friends joined in the laughter. The woman with the tray paused, hearing her mention, and looked up in confusion. She didn't understand what was going on, but she could feel the attention turning toward her. The wealthy man smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. He waved his hand and said loudly, "Why don't we all enjoy a little entertainment? You there, come, show us your talent." The room went quiet for a moment. Everyone waited for her reaction. She stood still, her face turning slightly pale. She didn't like being the center of attention, especially not in front of people like them. She shook her head softly and said, "Sir, please, I don't think this is the right time. I haven't practiced in a long while." But the man didn't listen. He stepped closer, pretending to sound kind, but his tone was still filled with mockery. "Oh, don't be shy. You might surprise us. Or are you afraid my piano is too fine for your touch?" The guests chuckled. She looked down at her tray, her fingers tightening around it. She felt embarrassed, but also didn't want to cause trouble. Working people like her knew how fragile such moments were. One wrong word could cost her a job. So she forced a small, polite smile and said softly, "If you insist, sir." She placed the tray on a side table and slowly walked toward the piano. The room watched her every step. Some people whispered to each other, expecting something funny to happen. A few others looked curious, wondering what made the wealthy man pick on her. She sat down carefully on the piano bench, her back straight but her hands trembling slightly. The wealthy man leaned against a column, crossing his arms with a smirk. "Go on then," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the silent room. She stared at the keys for a few seconds. The piano looked intimidating, large, shiny, and perfect. It was nothing like the old wooden one she used to play on as a child. For a moment she thought of getting up and walking away, but then she remembered her father's voice, soft and warm, telling her, "When you play, forget the world. Just speak through your music." She took a slow breath and placed her fingers on the keys. The room held its breath. The first note that came out was gentle, almost uncertain, like a whisper. Then came another and another, slow, soft, but graceful. It wasn't the sound of a nervous beginner. It was something real, something that had emotion. People who had been half smiling began to straighten up. The laughter faded. Her hands moved slowly at first, but with each passing second they grew more confident. The melody began to form, carrying a feeling that words couldn't describe. It was a tune filled with longing and beauty. It didn't sound like something rehearsed for a stage. It sounded like something lived through, like it had a story behind it. The wealthy man uncrossed his arms, his smirk disappearing. He looked confused. The music didn't just fill the air. It seemed to change it. The lights felt softer, the noise of the room gone. Even the waiter standing at the back stopped moving. Everyone's eyes were on her. She forgot where she was. Her mind went back to her childhood, sitting beside her father as he showed her how to find music and feelings. She remembered playing in a small room with peeling paint and an old broken window. She remembered how the piano was missing a few keys, but her father always said, "You don't need every key to make a song. You just need heart." As she played, a small smile appeared on her face, not of pride but peace. She was lost in the world of music where no one was rich or poor, no one laughed or mocked. It was just her and the piano. The crowd listened in silence. Some felt goosebumps. A few women looked emotional, feeling something they couldn't explain. It wasn't just music anymore. It was something deeply human. The tune rose higher, then softened again like waves coming and going. Every note seemed to tell a story of struggle, of dreams that never died, of love that kept going no matter what. When she finally stopped, the sound lingered in the air for a few seconds, before fading away completely. She lifted her hands off the keys and sat still, not looking up. For a moment, the room was completely silent. No one clapped. No one spoke. It felt as if everyone was still trying to process what they had just heard. Then slowly, someone began to clap. Then another and another. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding. The sound was loud and full of emotion, not polite, not forced, but real. The wealthy man clapped too, though his face looked pale. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Something inside him had shifted. The pride he had worn all evening now felt heavy and out of place. The woman stood up, bowed slightly, and said softly, "Thank you." She didn't look at anyone for long. She simply walked back to her tray, picked it up, and returned to work as if nothing had happened. But something had happened, something no one in that room would forget. The wealthy man looked at the piano, then at the woman, and for the first time that night, he didn't know what to say. The grand piano, his prized possession, had just been transformed by the hands of someone he had tried to mock. It wasn't the piano that mattered, it was the soul behind the music, and in that moment, every guest understood that sometimes the people we look down upon carry a beauty and strength far greater than we can imagine. The night after the party, the wealthy man couldn't sleep. He kept hearing the sound of that piano in his head. The soft, emotional notes the woman played refused to fade away. He had hosted dozens of parties before, filled with music, laughter, and bragging. Yet none of them had left him feeling like this. Something about her playing had struck him deeply, though he didn't want to admit it. He turned in bed, annoyed at himself for letting a simple worker's music get under his skin. Meanwhile, the woman went home that night with tired feet and a quiet heart. Her small apartment was dimly lit, the air filled with the smell of soup simmering on the stove. Her mother, frail but kind-eyed, sat in a chair near the window, knitting slowly. When she saw her daughter walk in, she smiled. "You're late again, my dear? Was it another long night?" The woman smiled faintly and nodded. "Yes, a big party. Too much noise." She didn't mention the piano or how the wealthy man had mocked her. She didn't mention how she ended up playing in front of everyone. She didn't want to worry her mother or sound proud. To her, it was just something that happened, and now it was over. Her mother, unaware of the strange evening, simply said, "You've always had a gift. Don't let anyone make you feel small for it." Those words warmed her heart. After dinner, she sat by the small window thinking about the way the music had poured out of her. It had felt natural, like breathing. For the first time in years, she realized how much she had missed the piano. The next morning, the wealthy man tried to go about his usual routine. He met business partners, made deals, and checked his investments, but nothing seemed to excite him. He felt restless. In the middle of a meeting, he caught himself staring at the piano in his office, wondering how that woman had played with such feeling. He had the best teachers money could buy once, but none of them could make the piano sound like that. By the evening, curiosity got the better of him. He called his housekeeper and asked about the woman who had worked at the party. The housekeeper was surprised. "Sir, she's a kind girl. Works hard. Lives near the old market area. Why do you ask?" He avoided the question and simply said, "I want to thank her for the performance." Later that week, he sent one of his drivers to deliver a sealed envelope to her home. Inside was a note written in neat handwriting. "You played beautifully. I would like to hear you again. Please visit my home at your convenience. Along with the note, he enclosed a generous amount of money as a gesture of appreciation. When she opened the envelope, she was shocked. She didn't expect anything from that night, and the money felt wrong to accept. Her mother urged her to go, thinking maybe he wanted to offer a better job or opportunity. The woman hesitated for a long time, but eventually decided to visit. She wanted to return the money personally and thank him politely. When she arrived at the mansion again, it was a quiet afternoon. The garden was filled with trimmed flowers and fountains that sparkled in the sunlight. A servant led her inside, where the wealthy man waited in the same grand hall. He looked different this time, less arrogant, more thoughtful. He greeted her with a polite nod. "I'm glad you came," he said softly. She handed the envelope back to him and said, "Sir, I can't accept this. I only played because you asked me to." He looked surprised but impressed by her honesty. "You deserve it," he insisted. "That night you gave everyone something real. You reminded us what music is supposed to be." She smiled gently. "Music isn't about money, sir. It's about heart." Her words hit him harder than he expected. For a man who measured everything by price and status, those simple words sounded like a truth he had long forgotten. He invited her to sit down, and for the first time, they talked like two people rather than a master and worker. She told him about her late father, who had taught her to play on a broken piano. She shared how she gave up music to take care of her mother after he passed away. As she spoke, her voice was calm, but her eyes carried years of quiet struggle. The wealthy man listened without interrupting. He realized he had never truly listened to anyone before without waiting for his turn to speak. The more she talked, the more he began to see the emptiness in his own life. He had wealth, luxury, and respect, but none of it had real warmth. Her story reminded him of something pure, the kind of simplicity he had lost a long time ago. After a long pause, he asked, "Would you consider teaching me? I want to learn to play again." Properly this time. She looked surprised. "Teach you? I'm not a professional teacher." He smiled slightly. "Maybe that's why I want to learn from you. You play with feeling, not technique. That's what I want to understand." She hesitated. It felt strange to imagine teaching someone like him, but she could sense sincerity in his voice. After a moment, she agreed. "If you truly want to learn, I'll try." Their lessons began the next week. Every morning before his business meetings, the wealthy man sat at the piano while she guided him patiently. At first, he struggled. His fingers were stiff and his timing was poor. He got frustrated easily, but she never raised her voice. She would say softly, "Don't think of it as a test. Let the music breathe." Little by little, something inside him began to change. He stopped checking his watch during lessons. He stopped boasting about his possessions. Instead, he began to listen, not just to the notes, but to the silence between them. For the first time, he understood that beauty wasn't in perfection, but in sincerity. One day, after weeks of practice, he asked her, "Why did you never pursue music as a career?" "You could have been famous," she smiled gently. "Fame wasn't my goal. My father always said we play for the heart, not for the crowd. I kept that promise. Even if my audience is just one person, I play the same way." Her words stayed with him. That night, he sat alone at the piano and tried to play one of the simple melodies she had taught him. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. For the first time in years, he felt calm. The house, usually filled with noise, felt peaceful. As weeks passed, people around him noticed the difference. He spoke kindly to his staff, treated people with respect, and even smiled more often. The arrogant air he once carried was slowly replaced by humility. It was as if music had softened something hard inside him. One afternoon, after a lesson, he looked at her and said, "You know, I used to think wealth made me powerful. But you've shown me that true strength comes from kindness. You didn't fight me that night at the party. You just played, and that taught me more than any lecture ever could." She didn't respond right away. She just smiled, looking at the piano. "Sometimes," she said, "the best way to teach someone is to let them feel." Their friendship grew naturally from that day. Though their worlds were different, they found common ground in music. It wasn't about teacher and student anymore. It was about two souls connecting through something pure and honest. As the sun set outside, the wealthy man realized how far he had come from the person he once was. He no longer felt the need to show off. He had learned something far greater, the quiet power of humility and the beauty hidden in simplicity. And it all began with one act of kindness, one moment of courage, and a song that came from the heart. Weeks turned into months, and the piano lessons became a quiet part of both their lives. Every morning, when the sun filtered through the tall windows of the mansion, the sound of the piano filled the hall. At first, the wealthy man's notes were clumsy and uneven, but under her patient guidance, they slowly began to form melodies that carried emotion. He learned to listen to the keys, not just press them. He learned to feel the pauses, not rush through them. For someone who had spent years chasing noise and applause, learning the beauty of silence was something new. The woman never treated him like a rich man. When he made mistakes, she simply smiled and said, "Try again, but this time don't think too much. Let it come naturally." Her tone was always calm, her patience endless. She didn't look impressed by his mansion or his clothes. To her, he was just another student learning to find himself through music. And that honesty made him respect her even more. Outside the music room, their lives were still very different. He continued running his businesses, attending meetings, and managing his wealth. But slowly, people around him began to notice a change. He wasn't as harsh as before. He no longer interrupted people mid-sentence or showed off his success at every chance. He listened more and spoke less. Even his staff, who once feared him, now found him kind and approachable. One day, during a lesson, he stopped playing halfway and looked at her. "You know," he said softly, "before I met you, I thought I had everything. I had money, power, and status, but I was never happy. It's strange how something as simple as music can change the way you see life." She smiled gently. "Music teaches you to feel again. Sometimes we forget that in the rush of life." He nodded thoughtfully, his fingers resting on the piano keys. "You're right. I think I had forgotten how to feel." For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The silence in the room wasn't empty, it was peaceful. It felt like both of them understood something unspoken about life and loss. The sound of the wind brushing against the windows filled the space between them. Later that day, she prepared to leave after the lesson. Before she could go, he said, "Wait, there's something I want to show you." He led her to a small room she had never seen before. Inside was a dusty old piano covered with a white cloth. "It belonged to my mother," he said quietly. "She loved to play, but after she passed away, I couldn't bring myself to touch it. I thought I'd forget her if I stayed busy, but maybe it's time I brought her music back." She looked at him kindly. "Music doesn't just remind you of people. It keeps them alive in your heart." Her words touched him deeply. That night, he sat by his mother's piano alone and played a simple tune. His hands trembled at first, but then he remembered her lessons. Don't think too much, let it come naturally. The sound filled the empty house, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel lonely. It felt alive. Days passed, and the two of them grew more comfortable around each other. They shared stories in between lessons. She told him about her small home, her mother's fragile health, and her simple dreams. He listened sincerely, sometimes offering help, though she always refused politely. "I'm happy with what I have," she would say with a gentle smile. He admired that about her. For someone who had faced so many struggles, she carried no bitterness. Her strength came from gratitude, not anger. She had very little, yet she seemed richer in spirit than anyone he knew. One afternoon, after a long practice, he said, "You know, I've been thinking. I want to do something meaningful. Not just for myself, but for others. Maybe open a music school or help children who can't afford lessons. What do you think?" Her eyes brightened. "That's a wonderful idea. Music can change lives. I've seen it happen," he smiled. "Then maybe you can help me make it happen." "You could lead it. Teach children the way you taught me." She looked surprised. "Me? I'm not qualified for that." "You're more qualified than anyone I know," he said firmly. "You don't just teach music. You teach heart." Her eyes softened, but she shook her head gently. "Let's take one step at a time. Let's see where life leads." He respected her humility, but inside he had already made up his mind. He wanted to build something that wasn't about money or fame, something that could carry meaning long after he was gone. As weeks turned into months, the lessons continued. The once distant mansion now felt warm and alive. The woman had unknowingly become a source of peace for him. Every morning when she arrived, it felt like sunlight entering the house. But life, as always, had its turns. One morning, she didn't show up for their lesson. He waited for hours, thinking maybe she was running late. When she still didn't come, he grew worried. He asked his driver to visit her neighborhood and check if everything was all right. The driver returned with a worried expression. "Sir, her mother fell very ill. She's been in the hospital since last night." Without thinking twice, the wealthy man got into his car and went straight to the hospital. He found her sitting beside her mother's bed, looking exhausted. When she saw him, her eyes widened in surprise. "You didn't have to come," she said softly. "I wanted to," he replied. "How is she?" "She's stable now," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The doctors say she needs rest, but it's going to be expensive." She tried to hide her worry, but he could see the pain in her eyes. He wanted to offer help, but he remembered how proud she was. So instead of handing her money, he quietly spoke to the hospital staff and arranged for the bills to be taken care of anonymously. When she later found out someone had already paid, she guessed who it was. But she didn't say anything. She simply whispered a small prayer of thanks. In the following days, he continued visiting the hospital, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just sitting silently nearby. They didn't talk much, but his presence gave her comfort. One evening, as they sat in the hospital corridor, she said quietly, "I don't know how to thank you." He looked at her and said, "You already have. You taught me how to live again." When her mother finally recovered, the woman returned to teaching him piano. But something between them had changed. It wasn't just about music anymore. It was about friendship, trust, and the quiet bond built through kindness. As time passed, the wealthy man finally completed his plan. He built a small music center near the community where she lived. He didn't name it after himself as he usually would. Instead, he named it Harmony House. It was a place where children from all walks of life could come and learn music for free. When he invited her to see it, she stood in awe. The rooms were simple but filled with instruments, bright light, and warmth. On the wall near the entrance, a quote was written, "Music belongs to everyone." Her eyes filled with tears as she read it. He turned to her and said, "This is what your music inspired. You reminded me that life isn't about showing off. It's about sharing what you have." She smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've done something beautiful." He shook his head gently. "No, we did." The first day at the music center, children gathered around, curious and excited. She sat at the piano and began to play. The same melody she had once played at that party filled the air again, but this time it wasn't surrounded by arrogance or judgment. It was surrounded by laughter, hope, and new beginnings. The wealthy man stood quietly near the doorway, watching the children listen with wonder. For the first time in his life, he felt truly proud, not because of wealth or recognition, but because he had done something that mattered. And deep down, he knew it all began with one woman, one song, and a moment that changed everything. The opening of Harmony House became a turning point in both their lives. The small music center quickly filled with the sound of laughter, clumsy piano notes, and children's voices. Every corner of the place carried a feeling of warmth. The wealthy man often visited, though he preferred to stay in the background and watch rather than take credit. He would sit quietly by the doorway, listening as the woman taught the children how to express their feelings through music. She didn't just teach them notes or techniques. She taught them patience, courage, and heart. The children adored her. They came from different walks of life, some from poor families, some shy, some struggling, but she treated them all the same. Her gentle way of teaching made them believe in themselves. When a child made a mistake, she didn't scold. She smiled and said, "Every wrong note brings you closer to the right one." Those words became the spirit of the place. The wealthy man often watched her from afar, realizing that kindness had a kind of beauty that wealth could never buy. Seeing those children play, seeing her smile as she guided them, it gave him a peace he had never known. He began spending less time at fancy parties and more time at Harmony House. He even started learning simple tunes to play along with the children. His old friends noticed his change and teased him about it, but he no longer cared. He had finally found something real. One afternoon, as he sat by the window of the music center, he overheard two children talking. One said, "Do you know who built this place? They say it was a rich man who used to be mean, but now he's nice." The other child giggled. "Then music must have fixed him." He smiled quietly to himself. Maybe they were right. That evening, after the children had gone home, the woman sat at the piano softly playing a new melody. The man stood nearby listening. "That's beautiful," he said after a while. "What's it called?" She looked up, smiling. I haven't named it yet. It's something new I'm working on. He nodded thoughtfully. It sounds like hope. She tilted her head slightly. Maybe that's what it is. Hope for better days. They both fell silent, letting the melody fill the room. It was peaceful, simple, and deeply human. Over the next few months, Harmony House became well known in the community. Local families came to enroll their children. Volunteers joined to help teach other instruments. The place was growing faster than either of them expected. Reporters came to write stories about it, calling it a place where hearts learned to sing. Despite the attention, the woman remained humble. She never claimed credit or sought fame. Whenever someone asked about the founder, she simply said, "It's not about who built it. It's about what it gives." The wealthy man admired that about her more than anything. He realized that her strength came from selflessness. She never looked for recognition. Her only wish was to share the joy of music. But life is never a straight road. One cold morning, while arranging papers in his office, the man received a call. It was from one of the teachers at Harmony House. The woman had fainted during a class. Without hesitation, he rushed to the center. When he arrived, she was sitting on a chair, pale but smiling faintly. "I'm fine," she said softly. Just a little dizzy. He didn't believe her. "You need to rest." "You've been working too hard." She laughed gently. "You sound like my mother." He smiled but insisted she see a doctor. Reluctantly, she agreed. After some tests, the doctor told her she was exhausted and needed to slow down. The wealthy man offered to manage the center while she rested. At first she refused, but he assured her everything would be fine. During her break, he took on responsibilities he had never handled before. He organized classes, spoke with parents, and made sure the children continued learning. He even found himself laughing and playing music with them. It felt strange and fulfilling. For the first time, he understood how much effort went into teaching, not just playing notes, but shaping lives. When she finally returned after a few weeks, she was surprised to see how smoothly everything ran. The children greeted her with hugs and laughter. The man looked at her with quiet pride. "You've built something special," he said. "I just tried to keep it running." She smiled warmly. "You did more than that. You made it grow." Their bond deepened after that. It wasn't spoken, but it was felt. They didn't need to say how much they respected and trusted each other. It showed in every small gesture, in how they looked after the children, how they shared ideas for the center, and how they both found joy in simple things. One evening, they stayed late, going through some papers together. The sun had set, and the room was filled with the soft glow of the lamps. He looked at her and said, "You know, before all this, I thought happiness came from success. But now I realize it's the small moments like this that matter." She looked up from her work, smiling gently. "Happiness is simple. We just make it complicated." Her words stayed with him. He started writing them down later that night, keeping them as a reminder of how far he had come. Months later, the center planned its first public recital. The children were excited to perform in front of their families. The wealthy man helped organize everything, from decorations to refreshments. The woman worked tirelessly to prepare her students, guiding them with patience and love. When the day finally arrived, the hall was filled with parents, neighbors, and supporters. The air buzzed with excitement. The wealthy man sat in the front row, nervous yet proud. The lights dimmed and the children began to play. Their small fingers moved over the keys, and the sound filled the hall with warmth. Some missed notes, some hesitated, but none of it mattered. Every note was honest. When it was her turn, the woman played the new melody she had been working on. It was soft and full of emotion, a story told without words. The crowd listened in silence, completely mesmerized. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. The wealthy man stood up, clapping louder than anyone else. After the performance, she approached him and said quietly, "They did well, didn't they?" He smiled. "They did more than well." "You did more than well." She shook her head gently. "It wasn't me. It was all of us." As the guests left, he stood near the piano, watching her pack the music sheets. He thought about how much his life had changed because of her. Once he had lived for applause. Now he lived for meaning. Once he had chased respect. Now he gave it freely. She had taught him that real success wasn't measured by wealth, but by the lives you touch. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, he stayed behind for a while. He sat at the piano and played a simple melody she had taught him in the early days. The sound echoed through the empty hall, soft and calm. It reminded him of that first night when she played at his party, the moment that had changed everything. When he finished, he looked around the quiet room. The chairs were empty, the lights dimmed, but the feeling in the air was alive. It was as if the music had left an invisible trace of joy behind. He smiled to himself and whispered, "Music really does belong to everyone." From that night on, Harmony House became more than just a music center. It became a symbol of second chances, of humility, and of the power of kindness. And for the wealthy man, it became the place where he finally learned that true happiness comes not from owning the best things in life, but from sharing them with others. After the recital, Harmony House grew even more popular. People from nearby towns began visiting to see the place where children learned to play music with heart. The story of the simple woman and the wealthy man spread quietly through word of mouth. Some said it was a miracle how the man had changed. Others believed it was the power of music that transformed him. But for those who truly knew them, it was something even deeper. It was kindness that healed both their hearts. The woman never sought attention. She continued her daily routine as if nothing had changed. Every morning she arrived early to clean the classrooms, tune the instruments, and prepare lessons for the children. The wealthy man often came by in the evenings, helping her carry things, fixing the lights, or just sitting nearby while she worked. He found peace in those quiet moments, watching her hum softly while arranging sheet music or smiling as a child handed her a drawing. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he walked into Harmony House with a thoughtful look. He carried a rolled-up paper under his arm. She looked up and asked, "What's that?" "Plans for an expansion," he said, placing the papers on the piano. "We have more students applying than we can fit. I thought maybe we could add another room for more instruments or maybe a library for music books." Her eyes softened. "That sounds wonderful. But will it cost too much?" He smiled faintly. "Some things are worth spending on." She nodded. She knew he wasn't talking about money. He had learned to invest in what truly mattered. The expansion began soon after. Workers came to build new rooms, and the children watched in awe as Harmony House grew. The woman made sure everyone stayed cheerful during the construction. She even taught the children to make songs about hammers and saws to keep them entertained. One day, while the man was inspecting the work, an old friend of his came to visit. The friend looked around the humble building with curiosity and said, "I never thought I'd see you here. You used to laugh at this kind of place." The man smiled, not offended. "I used to laugh at a lot of things I didn't understand." His friend frowned. "You've changed. Don't you miss the old life?" The man looked toward the classroom, where the woman was helping a small boy position his fingers on the keys. Her patience and warmth filled the room. "No," he said quietly. "I don't miss it at all." The friend studied him for a moment and then nodded slowly. "You look happier." "I am," the man said simply. Weeks passed and the new rooms were completed. Harmony House now had a small stage, a reading corner, and even a wall filled with framed photos of the students. Each picture told a story: a shy child who learned to smile, a student who performed for the first time, a group of kids laughing over a missed note. The wealthy man often stood before that wall, staring quietly at how far they had come. But life, as always, had its way of testing hearts. One day the woman received a letter. It was from her village. Her father had fallen ill and needed care. She folded the letter quietly and sat down at the piano, lost in thought. When the man arrived that evening, he immediately noticed her silence. "What happened?" he asked gently. She handed him the letter. After reading it, he looked up. "You need to go." "I can't," she said softly. "The recital for the new students is in 2 weeks. They need me. They need you healthy in heart too," he said. "Go to your father. I'll take care of everything here." She hesitated, looking uncertain. "I don't want to leave you with all the work." He smiled warmly. "You've taken care of everyone else. Let someone take care of you for a change." After a moment, she nodded. "Just for a few weeks," she said. She left a few days later. The children made cards for her, and the man promised to send her updates. The first few days felt empty without her presence. The classrooms were quieter, and though he tried to keep things running smoothly, he realized how much she was the heart of the place. At night, he would sit at the piano, playing small tunes to fill the silence. He missed her laughter, her calm voice, the way she encouraged everyone. He began to understand something deeper. He wasn't just grateful to her. He truly cared for her. Meanwhile, in her village, she cared for her father day and night. He slowly began to recover, but she often thought about Harmony House. She missed the children and the sound of their music. One evening, she received a letter. It was from the wealthy man. Inside, there were pictures of the children practicing for their recital and a small note that said, "They miss you, but they're making you proud." Her eyes filled with tears. She smiled and wrote back, thanking him for everything. In her letter, she added, "Take care of yourself too. Don't forget to play once in a while." When the recital day came, the hall was full again. The children played beautifully, their faces glowing with pride. At the end of the performance, the man walked up to the stage. He looked at the audience and said, "This place was built by more than bricks and money. It was built with heart. Today we play for the one who taught us what that means." He turned toward the piano and began to play. It was the same melody she had written, the one she called Hope. The notes were soft but steady. The children joined in, filling the room with harmony. The crowd applauded, some with tears in their eyes. A few days later, she returned. When she walked into Harmony House, the children ran to her with excitement. The man stood near the door, smiling as she stepped inside. "You came back just in time," he said. "We were missing our music." She looked around, her eyes shining with emotion. "You kept it alive beautifully." They sat together at the piano, and she noticed a framed photograph on the wall. It was of him and the children during the recital. She smiled and said, "You look happy there." He nodded. "Because you taught me what real happiness is." The following weeks were filled with joy. The woman continued teaching, and the man kept improving as a pianist. The children grew more confident with each lesson. Together they began planning another event, a music fair that would welcome families from nearby towns. The idea was to let everyone experience the joy of playing, no matter their skill level. The man helped organize everything. He designed banners, arranged sponsors, and even asked local shops to donate small gifts for the children. On the day of the event, Harmony House was alive with color and laughter. People came from all around to watch and take part. As the fair went on, the woman took a moment to watch the crowd. She turned to the man beside her and said softly, "This was once a dream. And now look at it." He smiled, his eyes full of warmth. Dreams grow when shared. The day ended with music and fireworks that lit up the night sky. The two stood outside, side by side, watching the lights reflect on the windows of Harmony House. The man turned to her and said quietly, "You know, when I first met you, I thought I was helping you. But now I see you were the one who helped me find myself." She looked at him kindly. "Maybe we helped each other." They both smiled, standing there in the cool night air, listening to the faint echo of music drifting from the building. It was a moment neither of them would forget, a moment that spoke of peace, friendship, and something deeper growing quietly between them. Harmony House stood behind them, glowing softly under the stars. It had become more than a place of music. It had become a home built on compassion, understanding, and second chances. And though neither of them said it aloud, both knew that their story was still being written, one simple, beautiful note at a time. Time moved forward and the seasons changed, but the bond between the woman and the wealthy man only grew stronger. Harmony House continued to thrive, becoming a place where dreams found their rhythm. Every day, laughter echoed through its halls, and the soft notes of piano music floated out the open windows, carrying joy into the world beyond. The man often said that the sound of those notes was better than any applause he had ever received in his former life. He truly meant it. The woman, humble as ever, focused on her students and their progress. She saw the potential in every child, no matter how small their talent seemed. Her patience and warmth continued to inspire everyone around her, especially the wealthy man. He had once believed that the world only respected power and money, but through her, he had learned that respect was earned through kindness, effort, and sincerity. One morning, he walked into Harmony House with a bright expression. In his hands was a newspaper. "Look," he said excitedly, showing her the front page. The headline read, "Local Music School Changes Lives." The article spoke about Harmony House, its mission, and how it had brought hope to children and families. There was even a photograph of the woman sitting at the piano, surrounded by smiling students. She blushed slightly and said, "I didn't know they were writing about us." He smiled warmly. You deserve to be known for what you've done. But she shook her head softly. It's not about being known. It's about what the music gives to them. Her words made him pause and smile again. That was who she was, simple, genuine, and good-hearted. He couldn't help but admire her even more. As months went by, Harmony House began to receive donations from people who wanted to support the cause. New instruments arrived, and some of the older students started volunteering to teach younger ones. The woman often said, "When you teach others, you learn twice." And it showed. The older children had become confident and proud of themselves. The wealthy man, meanwhile, continued to change in quiet ways. He no longer attended grand parties or flaunted his fortune. His joy came from small things: the laughter of children, the sound of music, the simple smiles shared over tea. People in town began to notice his transformation. Some admired it. Others were simply curious. But he didn't care about their opinions. For the first time, he was truly living, not just existing. Then, one winter afternoon, something unexpected happened. A well-known music organization sent an invitation to Harmony House. They wanted to feature the school and its students in a national concert for talented youth. The event would be held in a grand hall, with famous musicians attending. It was a huge opportunity. The woman was surprised when she read the letter. "This is too big for us," she said softly. The man shook his head. "It's perfect for us. It's time the world heard what you've built here." The children were thrilled when they heard the news. They practiced day and night, determined to make their teacher proud. The man helped organize everything: transport, instruments, and even new uniforms for the students. He wanted everything to be perfect. As the day of the concert approached, excitement and nervousness filled the air. The woman guided the children with calm words, reminding them to play from their hearts. "Don't think about the crowd," she said. "Just remember why we play: to share joy." When the big day arrived, the grand hall shimmered with lights. People filled the seats, waiting eagerly. The children stood backstage, trembling with anticipation. The woman looked at them with pride and said, "Remember, it's not about perfection. It's about emotion." The wealthy man stood beside her, dressed modestly but neatly. He smiled and said, "You've turned them into something extraordinary." She shook her head. "They did it themselves. I just showed them the way." When the performance began, the hall fell silent. The children played beautifully, their small hands moving gracefully across the keys and strings. Every note carried the warmth and love that had grown inside Harmony House. The audience listened with full attention, their faces softening as the music touched something deep within them. Finally, the woman herself walked to the piano. The crowd erupted in applause. She smiled nervously, then began to play. Her melody was the same one she had once played for the man long ago, the one that had changed his heart. But this time it was richer, filled with years of emotion and growth. The wealthy man, sitting in the front row, felt tears rise in his eyes. He remembered that first day when he had mocked her, when he had been too proud to understand beauty. Now he could only admire her and thank fate for bringing her into his life. When the performance ended, the entire hall stood and applauded. Some even had tears in their eyes. The woman bowed humbly and the children waved to the crowd. The wealthy man couldn't stop smiling. In that moment, he knew that this, more than any fortune or power, was true success. After the concert, journalists approached her, asking how she had built something so beautiful. She simply said, "By believing that everyone deserves a chance to be heard." Her words made headlines the next day, but she didn't think much of it. She was already planning the next lesson for her students. When they returned home, Harmony House felt even more alive. Parents brought flowers, and the children were full of stories to tell. The wealthy man threw a small celebration, insisting that everyone take a moment to appreciate what they had achieved. But amid all the joy, he quietly felt something else too: a deep sense of gratitude. Later that night, when everyone had left, he found the woman still sitting at the piano, her fingers softly tracing the keys. "You've changed so many lives," he said quietly. She smiled. "We both have." He hesitated, then said softly, "Do you ever think about how it all began? That day you played for me and I was too blind to see?" She laughed lightly. "Maybe it was meant to happen that way. Sometimes life teaches us through mistakes." He nodded slowly. "If I hadn't made that mistake, I might never have met you." The room fell into a gentle silence. Outside, snow began to fall, coating the world in soft white. Inside, the warmth of the lamps and the faint sound of the piano made everything feel peaceful. He looked at her, his heart full, and said, "Thank you for teaching me what real wealth is." She looked up, her eyes kind. "You found it yourself. You just needed to listen." Years later, Harmony House continued to flourish. The children who once learned their first notes there grew up and returned as teachers. The building expanded again, but its spirit never changed. It remained a place where anyone, rich or poor, could find hope through music. The woman eventually retired from teaching, but her presence lingered in every note played within those walls. The wealthy man, now older and gentler, spent most of his days at Harmony House helping wherever he could. Sometimes when he sat alone in the music room, he would play the melody she had written, the one called Hope. Visitors often found him there, his hands moving slowly over the keys, his eyes full of peace. When asked what kept him coming back, he would smile and say, "Because this is where I learned to listen, not just to music, but to life." And so Harmony House lived on, filled with laughter, music, and stories of kindness. The world outside continued to change, but inside those walls, the spirit of one simple woman and one transformed man remained forever. Their journey had begun with pride and mockery, but it had ended with understanding, compassion, and harmony. In the end, that was the true song they had created together, a song that needed no words, only the sound of two hearts that had finally learned how to play in tune.